Well, Benjamin, congratulations on your new position as chief conductor of the
Netherlands? No, I can't, not yet.
Het Groot Omroepkoor.
Groot Omroepkoor.
Yeah.
But I've downloaded the Dutch Duolingo.
Oh, you did?
So, yeah,
Okay, good.
so I'm on my way.
So what do you envision for the choir?
Well, I believe that the choir is a real jewel in the musical landscape of the Netherlands. It's a superb ensemble, and I want to bring the choir as close to the audiences as possible. So that means thinking about interesting concert formats, thinking about how we reach our audience, how do we engage our audience, how do we break down the barrier between audience and performer, and bring this vibrant, living ensemble to the people.
So how would you want to do that? Create these workshop sort of situations, daily project like Benjamin Goodson did for community projects with choirs?
The first thing I want to look at is I want to think about a concert format which is not a traditional concert format in the sense that you have an audience watching a performance on a stage and there's a sort of wall between the two. I think there is a place, even today, for these concert formats. But the great thing about a choir is that the choir only requires the bodies of the performers to sing. You don't need a great big orchestral setup. And that gives us a real flexibility. So I want to think about a new concert format which doesn't have this separation between performers and audience, where there's movement around the space, where the audience can come much closer to the performance to feel what it is like to be next to this body of sound. A more informal space where there's also talk, discussion.
What does singing mean to you?
I think it's the most fundamental musical expression that we have. Also the most human and personal, in the sense that it is simply, well, it's not simple, but it is simply the human body producing this wonderful sound. And I think I'm right in saying that there is no community ever discovered that has language which doesn't also have song. So I think it's a very primal human thing, is song, and also singing together. And I think that therefore when a choir performs, there is a sort of immediacy of the connection that sound makes, because it's something that resonates, literally resonates with all of us.
So did you grow up in this eminent choral tradition of Britain?
I came very late to it. I sang at Oxford, where I studied music.
So you didn't grow up in a boys' choir?
No. I came very late to classical music. My grandma was my first piano teacher. No one in my family has been a professional musician before. My grandma is a good amateur pianist, was my first teacher. But classical music evaded me. I started by playing jazz and pop and soul. And it wasn't until I started singing at school, so when I was 16 or 17.
So playing what in jazz? Piano?
Piano, yeah. And then I started singing. I went up to Oxford and studied music there and sang basically every day in a chapel choir. And I really fell in love with choral music at that point. And then I sang in a cathedral choir. So singing became a very important part of my life, and working with choirs became a very important part of my life. And I realized that not only was classical music what I absolutely wanted to do, but I wanted to work with text, and I wanted to work with voices, and I wanted to be involved in this endlessly fascinating project, which is to take many people and try to unify them, try to make them speak as one instrument. I think that's, when it's achieved, the most powerful musical tool that we have.
What made you decide to move those few yards from the choir itself to up front and starting to conduct an ensemble?
I like listening very carefully. I like the sort of psychological task of bringing people together. And I like thinking about meaning and interpretation and sound, and trying to transmit that to bring these individuals together and letting them retain their individuality, but in something which is a synergy, a whole, a unified whole.
As an orchestral conductor, it's not mandatory that you play the violin,
the
oboe, but as a choral conductor, it is expected from you that you sing, that you know how to communicate to a choir, explain with your own voice. You must be a good singer.
I was fine to sing, but I would never have been a top soloist. I think that's right. It's a very interesting difference. I think it's very helpful, not necessarily to be able to demonstrate yourself, but to be able to at least communicate with a sense of how things work vocally. And I think that going back to the orchestral comparison, I think it's very useful when orchestral conductors know about string technique, for example. In a similar way, I think it's very useful when choral conductors know about voice. And I think both of those things are important because it's in those contexts that you have the most people trying to sound like one. So you have many violins trying to sound like one. And therefore being able to direct very specifically how you want the sound produced is useful.
Do you recall the first time you heard the Groot Omroepkoor? What sort of ensemble did you encounter? I
realized very, very quickly what an extremely intense and vibrant sound this choir can deliver. It's a big sound, a passionate sound. You hear humanity in the sound, which I think is wonderful. It's a powerful instrument, and that brings with it a huge number of possibilities.